Hi, I'm Alise Chaffins. Today I'm joined by Tiffany Kim Stevens, the director of the new film Trigger Happy, which will be released on digital platforms on February 25th. Thank you so much for joining me today, Tiffany.
I am absolutely enthralled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Ooh, enthralled. Very exciting. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit just about the process of moving from filming short films to doing a feature-length film like Trigger Happy?
Yes, I can talk about it. It's really a pretty large jump because you are
Mm,
going from something that is just let's talk about the technicalities of movie making and make the best product possible. And now let's add on how do we make this commercially viable? How do we sell and how do we add in the business aspect of things? So yeah, jumping from short film is going from very creative and artistic to very creative and artistic plus very business oriented plus marketing oriented plus understanding and having a macro overview of how the film industry works and
mm.
ultimately how to sell.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about the selling aspect of it? Like what is different in that and how do you do that, especially as like an independent filmmaker?
Yeah, it's really difficult, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. And so much of it comes down to your script. Obviously, it needs to be great. The film itself, right? Your product. I hate to say that, but it's true. If you're going in with, the intent to sell, it needs to be incredible and it needs to look hot, what we call this thing called production value. So there's the
Hmm.
price, and then how do you make it look like 10 times the price for what it is? And that's, perfecting the art direction, using interesting lenses to really make, something that is independent look blockbuster esque to an extent, given the resources and the tools you have. And that comes down to the team. But ultimately, it's really the marketing and
Hmm.
sales team who is able to take the movie and bring it to the next level. And so much of that marketing entails, a cutting edge trailer, great posters, incredible reviews, getting, audience testing and making sure that there's, in a way, it's almost like a job interview where you need a bunch of different referrals and you need, a good synopsis and you need to understand marketing language and persuasive language. So that really is the bulk of how to really sell, is making sure your sales package is incredible. It's cutting
Yeah.
edge.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, speaking of production value, one of the things that's really striking about Trigger Happy is this kind of like retro futuristic kind of aesthetic that you have. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose that style for this film?
We knew that we wanted to set this in an uncanny parallel universe that was just a shade hair from our own, but
Hmm.
still relatable enough for audiences to understand, okay, this is still a commentary on America. And this is still, we're still satirizing liberals and conservatives both together. So being able to have it in such a staunch time, which is 50s inspired, we're able to really hone in on gender roles, which was a very clear theme in the film. But also from like a technical industry level, I think most studios and production companies steer away from period pieces because they're so expensive. And my future career thinking brain said, well, let's attack something that the industry considers difficult and expensive and see if we can do it for a lower budget to prove how technically our technical prowess, essentially.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I love the way that the film kind of tackled some of the absurdity of corporate life. Um, like the commercial for the Wow Sponge and then the party at the birthday party at the restaurant where George works. That's probably my favorite scene in the movie. I just rewound and watched it a couple times because it was so excellent. Can you just talk a little bit about your thought process in writing those scenes and yeah, I mean just kind of the film in general and how it deals with that aspect of like satirization.
Yes. When we were developing those themes, we were really cognizant of like consumerism and materialism in America, especially. And the Wow Sponge was really just, at the end of the day, it's really just a car sponge,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is the funniest part of it all. Um, And we knew we wanted to, poke fun at the ShamWow commercials.
Right.
We knew, when you go to the Cheesecake Factory, they have birthday dances because it's just about spending more, more, more. We want more. We need more. Give us more. And it was, it's not as deep and introspective and esoteric as you think it is. It really is just as is on the screen, as face value. Hey, this is what's happening. This is how ridiculous it is, but also how absurdly entertaining it is. And you love to hate it and you hate to love it.
Exactly.
And that's really what we were going for. We didn't want to get to, oh, this is deeper levels of capitalism. It is what it is. It's clear.
Right. Yeah.
Consumerism, materialism, and capitalism is clear. Audiences are
Absolutely.
not stupid.
No, it was just super fun. Outside of like Kent, I don't think there are any really nice people in this movie. Um, so when you were writing these characters, did you see them kind of as people who were maybe like inherently not nice, or were they more people who were pushed that way by like outside forces? Because honestly, as I was watching, I couldn't really make up my mind how I felt like they were. So I'd love to hear your perspective as
Yes,
the person who, came up with them.
absolutely. Well, it is a villain's journey,
Hmm.
ultimately. Everybody in there except Kent is written as a villain and is a villain. And so much of Hollywood and modern American movies focus on heroes and anti-heroes, and we never really see what a true villain's journey is.
Mm.
And it's the idea that these characters are starting at rock bottom, and then the bottom is pulled from under them. And what does that new kind of storytelling look like? What does that new character archetype look like? And we just wanted to explore something that not many American movies do, but also a lot of international movies do, being from Hong
Mhm.
Kong and having French, Vietnamese, and American, you know, in me. I wanted to sort of bring a little bit more of that international taste through the characterization. And, it's one of these, it's a cautionary tale at the end of the day. It's these horrible people who refuse to believe they're horrible, which is ultimately what villains are,
Right.
trying to do the best that they can without thinking about the ethical implications of every single decision that they make. And I think a huge one for me was, having our little girl, a Triceratops girl, and to me, she represents the failure of adults in this
Mm.
society that we're building. She's wanting attention from the principal. She's shooting these adults in the playground, and she seems like, oh, what an annoying little kid. But ultimately, it's like, wow, this society of adults has failed this child, and this is the result of villains meandering about the world. So they are ultimately supposed to be unlikable, and they are all villains in their own way.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think I actually like speaking of the little girl and her guns, I thought it was kind of interesting the role that weaponry played in the film. Can you just talk a little bit about that, about like guns and especially the soapbox lady? I always think that she's like just a really great character and like just some of the commentary there. So can you, yeah, just kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yes, we wanted to build a world that was essentially pretty purple, a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. And so much of that was okay. At least when we were developing the project, there was so much talk in the zeitgeist about healthcare and then also gun ownership. And we thought, hey, why don't we build a world where if you own a gun, you get free health insurance? And what does that look like politically? And how does that influence the culture, essentially? We didn't want to ram on like, here's the political structure of the movie. It was sort of like, hey, here's the idea, but let's focus in on these characters who are living in this purple society. And um, the megaphone woman on the soapbox is this authoritarian regime, that really sort of was there to influence and hammer in the absurdity of a society that takes two extremes and puts them together instead of finding a nice little compromise.
Mhm.
It was sort of like, okay, the pendulum swings in like extreme directions, and you put those two extremes together, we're not living in the happiest society that we could be, because still both parties are not compromising or talking. They're just putting both in for the sake of putting both in. And that manifests itself into two regimes that are quite authoritarian, and the representation even in the casting. We have a woman of who's a minority being a very authoritarian figure who would be maybe traditionally seen as like a white American man.
Hmm.
So even that was very conscious in the way that we wanted to create her and put her in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the other things too is there's so much time, especially at the beginning of the movie, like focused on getting ready for this audition for the, wow sponge and everything, only to find out that it's paid and experience kind of thing. Can you talk about that as well? Because I'm sure as a creative, you have dealt with that
Yes,
now
yes,
and again.
that was a little nod to Hollywood.
Yeah.
A little of like when you're out of school, or you're fresh in the industry, you're sort of expected to work for basically nothing because it's a privilege to be on a film set. It's a privilege to be in Hollywood. Whereas, given the strikes and the fact that so many people out here and unions are not paying enough, like it's really a nod to that. And it was a sort of a tip of the hat to the fellow crew members and union members in Hollywood to say, hey, we recognize it and we see it. And we're here to do what we can to
Right.
give representation and a voice to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just as we're kind of wrapping up here, what would be the kind of main takeaway that you would want audiences to take from this film, from Trigger Happy, when they come out, what is kind of the thing that you want them to be thinking about when they're leaving the theater or finish watching it,
Yes.
yeah, at home?
That it is okay to laugh at the absurdity of life.
Mm.
Life is absurd. The punchlines are there if you can find them, but regardless, it's okay to smile and laugh. And it's okay to not take everything so seriously because life is so short. And
Mm.
that's, I think, the weaving humor that we created with this movie, that it's not your traditional setup, punchline, setup, punchline. It's just sort of like oh, these characters are in absurdly ridiculous situations. You can't help but just kind of laugh anyways.
Right.
And so that's the big takeaway. It's okay to laugh at the absurdity of life.
Mm. I like that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes today to sit and talk with me. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you
yeah,
so much.
it's an interesting thank you film. So I really appreciate that as well. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much and
Great.
best of luck to you with that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.